Somewhere in the world right now, a woman is giving birth in a hospital room. There are monitors, there are doctors, there are drugs that block pain so completely that some women sleep through contractions. There is a surgical team on standby in case anything goes wrong. There is a machine measuring the baby's heartbeat every second. And it is still one of the most dangerous things a human body can do. Now remove all of it. Remove the hospital, remove the doctors, remove the drugs. Remove the monitors and the surgical team and the sterile equipment and the blood transfusions and everything else that modern medicine spent 200 years building specifically because childbirth without it kills people. What you have left is every human birth for the first 300,000 years of our existence. No painkillers, no intervention, no way to know if something was going wrong until it already had, and yet here you are. Every single one of your ancestors survived long enough to have children. Going back 300,000 years, every link in that chain held, what they figured out without any of our tools, is one of the most extraordinary stories in the history of our species. To understand what ancient childbirth was actually like, you first need to understand something that most people don't know. Human childbirth is uniquely dangerous, not just compared to modern standards. Compared to almost every other animal on the planet, a foal comes out front legs first, head tucked between them, and the whole process takes less than an hour. A dolphin calf comes out tail first, ready to swim within minutes. Most primate births are fast, relatively straightforward, and the mother can usually manage alone. Human birth is different, dramatically different. The reason goes back to the two things that make humans unusual. We walk upright on two legs, which requires a narrow pelvis, and we have enormous brains, which require a large skull to contain them. These two features are in direct conflict during childbirth. A pelvis shaped for efficient upright walking is not shaped for passing a large-skulled infant through it. The human birth canal is so narrow relative to the baby's head that the baby has to rotate as it moves through, turning 90 degrees mid-delivery to navigate the shape of the canal. No other primate does this. In most primates, the baby comes out facing toward the mother, so she can reach down, guide it, clear its airway, bring it to her chest. In humans, the baby comes out facing away, facing backward, which makes self-delivery almost impossible and dangerous to attempt. This is not a modern problem. This is not a result of diet or lifestyle or anything humans did wrong. This is built into our biology. The obstetric dilemma, the conflict between bipedalism and big brains, has been killing women during childbirth for as long as our species has existed, which means that from the very beginning, humans needed help. The oldest and most important innovation in human childbirth history has no inventor. It was never announced. It left almost no archaeological record. It was simply this: someone else being in the room. Anthropologists believe that assisted birth, having at least one other person present during delivery, is one of the oldest human behaviors we have, possibly older than our species itself. The evidence comes from comparing humans to our closest relatives. Chimpanzees almost always give birth alone. They move away from the group, deliver in private, and return with the infant. Gorillas do the same. Orangutans do the same. Humans are the dramatic exception. In every human culture ever studied, everyone across every continent, every era, every level of technological development, women do not give birth alone. There is always someone there. Always. Anthropologist Wenda Trevathan has spent decades studying this pattern. Her conclusion is that assisted birth isn't a cultural invention. It's a biological need that predates culture itself. The anatomy that makes human birth so difficult, that backward-facing exit, that narrow canal, that necessary rotation, made solitary birth genuinely dangerous in a way that selected against it over hundreds of thousands of years. The women who tried to give birth alone were more likely to die. The women who had help were more likely to survive. And over enough generations, the behavior of seeking help during birth became deeply embedded in human psychology. We didn't invent midwifery. We evolved toward it. The oldest confirmed evidence of a designated birth attendant comes from ancient Egypt, around 1500 BCE. The Ebers Papyrus describes specific roles for women assisting in delivery, but this is just the earliest written record. The practice itself is almost certainly as old as anatomically modern humans. So what did an ancient birth actually look like? The evidence comes from multiple sources: ancient texts, archaeological sites, anthropological studies of isolated populations that maintained traditional birth practices into the modern era. And the remarkable consistency across all of these sources suggests that ancient humans figured out some things that genuinely worked. The first thing they figured out was position. For most of Western medical history, from roughly the 17th century onward, women were told to give birth lying on their backs. This was convenient for doctors and catastrophically inefficient for the woman. Lying flat works against gravity, narrows the pelvic outlet, and makes the natural rotation of the baby harder. Ancient humans never did this. Archaeological evidence and anthropological studies of traditional birth practices consistently show the same positions: squatting, kneeling, sitting, supported from behind. These positions use gravity. They open the pelvis. They work with the body rather than against it. Modern obstetrics has confirmed what ancient humans figured out empirically. Upright positions during delivery reduce labor time, reduce the need for intervention, and reduce the rates of certain complications. We spent 300 years ignoring this because lying down was more convenient for male physicians with forceps. The second thing they figured out was water. Warm water has been used during labor across dozens of separate cultures, from ancient Egypt to indigenous populations in the Americas to traditional practices in Southeast Asia. The warmth relaxes muscle tension. It reduces the perception of pain. It slows the delivery enough to reduce tearing. Modern medicine rediscovered water birth in the 1960s. Ancient humans had been using it for thousands of years. The third thing was plants. Ergot, a fungus that grows on grain, contains compounds that cause uterine contractions. Ancient midwives in multiple cultures used preparations containing ergot to manage labor that was progressing too slowly or to reduce bleeding afterward. Ergotamine, the active compound, is still used in modern obstetrics to manage postpartum hemorrhage, blue cohosh, black cohosh, raspberry leaf, shepherd's purse. Across cultures on separate continents, ancient midwives independently identified plants that affected uterine function. Modern pharmacology has confirmed that most of them contain compounds that do exactly what ancient midwives claimed. They didn't know why these plants worked. They just knew that they did, but here's what none of this could fix. Ancient midwives could position a woman optimally. They could use warm water. They could administer plant preparations. They could offer physical support and emotional presence, and everything accumulated wisdom told them to do. And sometimes none of it was enough. The most dangerous complications of childbirth, obstructed labor, eclampsia, severe hemorrhage, infection, are not solved by positioning or plants or presence. They require surgical intervention, blood transfusion, intravenous antibiotics. They require tools that didn't exist. Obstructed labor, where the baby physically cannot pass through the birth canal, has a name in obstetrics that comes from ancient Greek. It was common enough that ancient physicians named it. Without intervention, it kills the baby. Without further intervention, it kills the mother. Archaeological evidence is brutal on this point. Analysis of ancient skeletal remains consistently finds high rates of pelvic pathology in women who survived complicated deliveries. Fistulas, tears between the birth canal and bladder or bowel caused by prolonged obstructed labor, were common enough to be described in detail in ancient Egyptian medical texts. They were considered one of the most devastating injuries a woman could survive. Because many didn't. Maternal mortality in pre-modern populations is estimated to have been somewhere between 1 and 3% per birth. That sounds low, but a woman who had 5 children faced a cumulative risk of 5 to 15% of dying in childbirth, across a lifetime, across a community. Ancient midwives knew this. They worked with the knowledge that despite everything they could do, sometimes they would lose the mother, sometimes they would lose the baby, sometimes both. They did it anyway, birth after birth, generation after generation, carrying knowledge forward into a future they were risking their patients' lives to create. Here's what the history of ancient childbirth actually tells us. Modern obstetrics, with all its technology, all its interventions, all its machinery, is not a replacement for what ancient midwives did. It's built on top of it. The positioning knowledge survived and was eventually confirmed. The plant compounds were isolated and synthesized. The practice of having a continuous known support person present during labor, which ancient cultures maintained automatically because birth was a community event, was studied by modern researchers in the 1980s and found to reduce labor time, reduce the need for pain medication, reduce cesarean rates, and improve outcomes for both mother and baby. They named this continuous support person a doula. It was a new word for something 300,000 years old. The most significant study on this was published in 1991 by researchers Kennel and Klaus. They found that women who had continuous emotional and physical support throughout labor had dramatically better outcomes across almost every measure. The medical community was surprised by the results. Ancient midwives would not have been. What those women figured out, sitting with laboring women in darkness and firelight, counting contractions, applying pressure, speaking quietly, staying, was not primitive. It was not a gap waiting for science to fill. It was knowledge. Real, functional, hard-won knowledge passed from woman to woman across hundreds of thousands of years. Some of it we lost, some of it we dismissed, some of it we rediscovered and published in journals and acted like it was new. 300,000 years ago, a woman went into labor in a world without hospitals or doctors or any understanding of germ theory or blood type or the mechanics of the pelvis. And someone came to be with her. They knew which position helped. They knew which plants helped. They knew to use warm water. They knew to speak quietly and apply pressure and stay, to stay no matter how long it took or how frightening it became. They couldn't save everyone, they knew they couldn't save everyone, and they came anyway. The knowledge they built, tested against the hardest possible standard, refined by every birth that went wrong and every birth that went right, survived. Through 10,000 generations of women passing it to the next. Through the development of language and the invention of writing and the rise and fall of entire civilizations. It survived long enough to be confirmed by research papers and published in medical journals and incorporated into modern clinical guidelines. It survived long enough to reach you. Every human alive today is the result of that chain holding. Someone came, someone stayed, someone knew enough to help and cared enough to try in the dark without any of the tools we now consider essential. The tools changed, the medicine changed, the knowledge accumulated and the survival rates improved, and the world became something those ancient women could not have imagined. But the thing at the center of it, one human being staying with another through the hardest thing a body can do, that never changed at all. And maybe it never needed to.